Hello everyone, this is Isha for Pinkfresh Studio. In today's video, I'll be creating watercolor techniques, embossed texture, and a layered floral cluster to really bring the design to life. I'm using Bloomsmith floral dies. This comes as a die and stencil combo. I'm using the dies only for today. Next is fresh floral from the older release and again a die and stencil combo. I'm using the sentiment I will always pick you from the freshly picked stamps and dies. I'm using Trellis cover plate for adding texture for the background. Iridescent dewdrops. I'm using liquid watercolors from Pinkfresh Studio. The colors I'm using are lavender, aquamarine, Grassy Knoll from the classic collection, then marigold, raspberry blush, and mulberry blush from the jewel tones, and finally I'm using coral reef ballet slippers from the pastels. All the supplies I used are listed in the description box below, so don't forget to check them out. To start, I already die cut some florals and leaves using the watercolor paper, and I have some color on my palette from the previous projects. One of my favorite things about the Pinkfresh liquid watercolors is that even when they dry, you can reactivate them with water. That means nothing goes to waste. Have you tried reactivating dried watercolor before? It's such a small detail, but helps us save our precious bucks. I am picking up some of the dried pigment, and if I need more intensity, I'll just add fresh drops to the palette. I'm starting with a very light wash. Whenever I watercolor florals, I always begin softly and then build up depth gradually. If you enjoy relaxing watercolor techniques and watching color gently on the paper, you are going to love this process. Layering slowly gives you much more control. It allows the water to distribute the pigment evenly, and you get those soft transitions between shades. It's always easier to add color than to remove it once it's saturated onto the paper. I am switching between ballet slippers, marigold, and peach. On my palette, I already have mulberry blush and raspberry bliss watercolor, so I'm incorporating those two for the darker tones. The beauty of liquid watercolor is that once you introduce water, the pigment starts moving organically. You don't have to overwork it, just guide the color gently. Sometimes I pause and just watch how the color spreads. That's honestly one of the most relaxing parts. Here I'm layering two shades. I added soft peach underneath and now I'm bringing in a bit of red on top of it. Notice how I'm placing the darker shade where I naturally want shadow. Are you someone who plans your shadows or do you just let them happen naturally? Oh, my marigold watercolor ran out, so no problem. I'm just refreshing the palette. That's another advantage of the liquids. Super easy, right? I just make sure to dry the colors in the palette before I close it, and that helps me not getting mold in the colors. Spring is slowly coming, and I can't wait for it after those gray winter days are over. I'm really drawn to yellows, pinks, peaches, teals, and soft lavender. These shades just feel light and hopeful. Do your color choice change with the seasons too? Sometimes I don't remove the die cut pieces from the panel. This way, we don't have to hold the pieces. And some people find this way easier, so I'm just showing the option here. Now, moving on to the greens, I'm using Grassinol ink and, um, not ink, watercolor, and again started with a light wash. Leaves can sometimes look flat if they are just one tone, so I like to build dimension gradually. Once the base layer is down, I'm even adding the tiniest touch of red into the green. Adding complementary colors into shadows makes the leaf feel more realistic and less flat. For the smaller leaf cluster, I'm using aquamarine watercolor. Smaller areas require less water, so be mindful. For the final flowers, I'm bringing in lavender. Again, I start very softly. For the floral centers, I'm adding licorice watercolor. Normally, once everything dries, I reassess my image again. If I want deeper shadows, I can either add more watercolor or switch to coordinating ink colors since they match beautifully. Here you might see the jar in the background. At first, I thought about including the jar element, but as I started arranging everything, I decided not to use the jar and keep the florals free. Does it happen to you? Where your design changes halfway through? I keep changing as I go. Now I want to add subtle background texture. I'm using the Trellis coverplate die and embossing it with my die cutting machine. Following the manufacturer's instructions and using the tan mat for proper embossing. Embossing adds dimension without adding color or anything else, which keeps the focus on the florals. Now comes my favorite part, arranging the cluster. I am laying out the florals and leaves and shifting them around until the composition feels balanced. While arranging, I realized a few areas needed more depth. Instead of going back to the watercolor, I'm using coordinating ink with a small brush. For example, here I'm using candy violet ink to add controlled shading. Using ink for detail work gives you sharper contrast compared to watercolor. It's a great hybrid technique. For the smaller leaves, I'm adding depth using waterfall ink. And for the larger green leaves, I'm bringing back Grassy Knoll ink to enhance shadows. There is no strict rule here. I'm just enhancing areas that feel flat. Look at the difference. That extra layer of depth instantly adds life to the elements. Sometimes I prefer to use only watercolors, and at other times, I would like to mix watercolors and inks like this. What do you like? What do you prefer? Now I start assembling. I'm using liquid adhesive to attach the floral layers. For the large flower, I am layering three die cuts for dimension. That thickness gives the card such a lovely feel. For smaller flowers, I'm layering as well. I move things around quite a bit before adhering. I always recommend stepping back for a little bit and looking at the composition from the distance. It helps you see imbalance quite fast. Here, some elements are adhered flat with liquid adhesive, and others I'm going to attach with 3D foam for playful dimension. Varying heights create visual movement. For the lilac flowers, I'm adding licorice rounds for the centers for dimension. Next, I'm adhering the embossed panel to a white card base using liquid adhesive. This gives us a little bit of wiggle room. I place acrylic blocks on top to ensure even pressure while drying. This step prevents warping too. I arrange the cluster again, trim small areas if needed, and finalize placement. Again, mixing liquid adhesive and foam tape for dimension. Keep experimenting until it feels right. There is no rush in this part. I still have leftover florals, which means I can create another card layer. I always love stretching my supplies. Now I'm adding white splatters using white acrylic paint over the watercolored images. Splatter adds organic texture and softens transitions between the elements. For the sentiment, I'm stamping with detail black ink using my Misty, a stamping tool. ensures a crisp impression, especially when we want to restamp for the exact color saturation we want. I die cut the sentiment with the coordinating die and cut a blank layer as well. I adhere them together using liquid adhesive to make the sentiment sturdier. Before attaching it, I'm adding fine black splatters around the edges. This step looks small, but it helps visually connect the sentiment to the design. Now I'm adding 3D foam tape behind the sentiment and positioning it carefully. I'm using a T ruler to make sure it's straight because once I see it slightly crooked, I won't unsee it. I always want to be precise with my sentiment or images. And yes, in that process, I make my life more difficult. To finish, I'm adding iridescent dewdrops for extra movement and dimension. And that completes our card. I love how the soft watercolor layers, embossed texture, and dimensional floral all come together. It feels fresh, light, and full of spring energy. I am longing for spring. What about you? I would love to know which technique did you enjoy most in today's process. Let me know. I always love hearing which part you enjoy the most. I hope you enjoyed watching this creative process. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you never miss out on new crafty inspiration. See you next time. Happy crafting and bye bye.